It was 20 years ago when a young Hikiko made a big mistake. He went to GameStop, but he was looking for the sequel to his favorite game at the time, Silent Hill 3. A sequel to the Silent Hill franchise was coming out 1 year apart from the last one, and that was one of the most phenomenal games he had ever played. He went through the GameFAQs message boards and read all the speculation threads. He became a moderator on Silent Hill Heaven at the age of like 13. He also went to that GameStop day after day after day asking, hey, where's the new Silent Hill? When's it coming out? And they'd often ignore him because they were only getting paid $5.25 to not babysit him. That's true. I know that because I ended up working there later that summer. Until one day, he asked, Silent Hill 4? And the clerk merely gestured to the pre-order wall over there. Go on, kid. Go on, look, see what's over there? And Hikiko rushed over to the pre-order wall. And what did he see? But a box with a big ghostly face on it. And it said Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill 3? That's a mistake. Silent Hill 3 had been out for a year at that time. So he grabbed that box off the shelf. He grabbed a copy of Silent Hill 3 and he brought it to the clerk and he said, hey, your pre-order box has a big mistake on there. Silent Hill 3 is already out. I have it in my hand. He goes, there's no mistake, kid. Just put it back where you got it. Just put that box back where you got it and leave me alone. Hikiko was dejected. He knew that this was misinformation and that he had to put a stop to it. So a young Hikiko did what any good Silent Hill fan would do. He stole it. He stole the misprint copy. That's right, Silent Hill 3 with the little ghost there. And just so you know, this is legit what they posted up in GameStop back in 2004. This was all over the wall, and I took it and I scanned it and I've preserved it on the internet, so everyone will remember GameStop's big mistake and Hikiko's crime at the same time. Let's take a closer look at it, shall we? Silent Hill 3. Henry Townshend finds himself trapped in his apartment that has been cursed by a deeply rooted evil. Only by exploring mysterious portals leading to disturbing alternate worlds will Henry begin to uncover the truth. A new Silent Hill adventure where terror comes to your room. Horrific new monsters, including spirits that can attack through walls. Expansive areas to explore, including a forest, prison, and hotel. A cast of mysterious new characters. Box mocked up for display purposes only. Silent Hill 4: The Room is perhaps the most divisive entry in the mainline Silent Hill franchise. I'm talking about 1 through 4, not all the Western games that came afterwards, but 1 through 4. 4 is by far the most polarizing entry. Some people absolutely love it. But me, when it first came out, I just didn't understand it. I thought it was extremely frustrating to play. I figured, okay, new mindset, older Hikiko, let's go in, let's get the PC version because that was the only way to currently buy this at the moment. Good Old Games had it, DRM free. I downloaded it, I played it on my PC, so that's what you're gonna see here. Oddly enough, there's only 2 official Silent Hill games for sale on the PC. There's Silent Hill Homecoming and Silent Hill 4: The Room. So if you want to play the other, that like Silent Hill 3 and Silent Hill 2 did get PC releases, but they were on disc. But you can go on like archive.org and probably find them there and download them like yours truly did. So tonight we are gonna dive deep into the hole of Silent Hill 4: The Room. Whew. What a monologue. That was awesome. The introduction of Silent Hill 4: The Room leaves a very strange first impression. You're greeted to the chained up door to room 302 with this odd ghostly distortion filter over it. And then you hear the sounds of Akira Yamaoka strumming away on his guitar, playing my favorite track, The Last Mariachi. Tonally, it doesn't go with anything else in Silent Hill 4, but it worked a lot better when he recycled this track later on when he was the main composer for Shadows of the Damned. Many players will never hear this version of Last Mariachi because it requires you to own the PS3 version of Shadows and then linger on the cross-media bar icon for the game, as a sped-up version of the Last Mariachi will play for you. Now, if you let the title screen linger for a little bit, the game presents its quote-unquote attract mode. Now, in past Silent Hill games, the attract mode video would act as somewhat of a prologue to the game and introduce some cutscenes that just might not appear later on in the game, like Silent Hill 2. There's several scenes like where you see Eddie sit next to his van, or James carrying a body through the prison, that only exist in this introduction video. They give you a little bit more supplementary context to help the player make some inferences about what took place right before the game got started. Silent Hill 4's introduction video just gives you some gameplay footage where they lowered the frame rate and added a crazy noise filter and tried to make it look like a snuff film. And in a way, this video is a misrepresentation of the actual tone and atmosphere of the game itself, where the final game just isn't as scary as this intro video might lead you to believe. Now, once you enter the game proper, that's when things start to get interesting. We're only given a few paragraphs of text as a setup to the game's story. We learn that we play as Henry Townsend, an unassuming photographer who moved into the South Ashfield Heights apartments about 2 years ago. Well, for the past 5 days, he's been trapped inside of his own apartment due to the entrance being inexplicably bound up by chains. Henry can't go out, and no one can get in. Communication to the outside world has been entirely cut off from him, and his apartment is slowly being corrupted by mysterious ghostly forces. The first time I played this introduction, I was absolutely gripped in the change of perspective. This is the first Silent Hill game that gave the player a first-person perspective, unless you're counting the obscure graphic novel on the Game Boy Advance for that one guy out there who's gonna mention that. Okay, maybe that was the first. Regardless, I think this game is most fondly remembered for the exploration and haunting aspects of Henry's apartment, more so than the third-person action segments that take up the majority of the rest of the game. Henry gets attacked by some random ghost, and then it cuts to a beautiful montage of a camera panning around Henry's apartment to truly hype us up for some good old-fashioned hauntings. Now, it's a large misconception that this game was originally going to be called Room 302, and it wasn't going to be a Silent Hill game from the start. But the game's director has squashed this rumor time and again, stating that it was always meant to be a Silent Hill game, and that Room 302 was kind of a working title that represented its core focus to differentiate itself from the rest of the series, but at the same time connecting the other 3 games in a really beautiful universe-building kind of way. However, I think it would have been much more effective if they did release the game as Room 302 and then revealed later on throughout the story that it was in fact a secret Silent Hill title. I mean, we saw how well that worked for PT. Imagine if they had done something like this back in 2004. It would have been one of gaming's greatest surprise reveals. Henry wakes up from the nightmare and we get a better look at our guy. The game quickly establishes that he is unable to contact the outside world, but he is able to take a look at the vibrant living city of Ashfield right outside of his apartment window. This is another unique feature that differentiates Silent Hill 4 from the rest of the series. People are actually out there living their lives, and there will be slight little variations to what's going on the outside depending on where you are in the story. There are a couple of story notes up front that I feel a lot of people gloss over. For one, Henry isn't necessarily a random dude who had no prior connection to Silent Hill getting thrown into the world of it. He had actually visited Silent Hill a few years before the game got started and took photos of a lot of different key places like the lighthouse and Toluca Lake. Also, many believe that this is the first game that took place outside of Silent Hill, but that's also not the case because Silent Hill 3 begins with Heather waking up after a burger nap inside of a mall mall that takes place in an unknown town also outside of Silent Hill. So it's not exactly like Silent Hill 4 is breaking new ground by starting outside of the titular town. What's very effective is how the game presents Henry's apartment as a relative safe haven. It puts your mind at ease. Not a whole lot goes down here. You find the occasional mysterious red note that gives you some cryptic information about what's going on in the story. Henry can pop open his fridge for a little white wine and chalky milk. And the only ominous thing about his apartment starting off is the whole chained up door thing with the bloody text under the peephole that reads, "Don't go out, Walter." Who Walter is and why he wants Henry to be trapped in his apartment is left unclear for now, but it's here we're given another unique perspective. The door peephole allows Henry to see what's going on with the other tenants inside the apartment building. A couple of times throughout the game, he attempts to pound on the door and scream for help in vain. It's a one-way communication system where Henry can hear everyone else, but they can't hear him.
Help me! Help! Let me out of here!
There's something going on in this room.
Henry hears a crash emanating from the bathroom, and he goes to investigate. A large hole has formed in the middle of his bathroom, and I love the way they chose to present this. It's in a third-person perspective, and there's a bit of mirror that remains on the wall that gives us a look at Henry's facial expressions as he's observing the hole. Henry is mostly a stoic character that is quite ambivalent to all the hauntings that are going on around him, and this line here is about the only character development you're ever gonna get out of Henry Townsend.
What the hell?
Sometimes I like to just sit and stare at the hole and listen to all the ominous, ghostly baby voices reverberating throughout it, contemplating what could be on the other side. There's an unspoken rule in Silent Hill games. It's called the Order of the Hole. When a mysterious hole presents itself to you, you must enter it without fear or hesitation. When Henry enters the hole, you go through a slow crawling motion towards a bright white light. Some of you might be getting some birth canal vibes out of this, and that's quite intentional. On the other side of the hole, Henry is spat out into an underground subway. Silent Hill 4 is made up of a lot of impossible geography scenarios, and it deals a lot with random portal logic.
What the hell?
It's a lot like the movie Being John Malkovich, where John Cusack's character finds a mysterious door in his office which allows him to control the body of actor John Malkovich, and then eventually spits him out randomly into the New Jersey Turnpike. So Henry finds himself in an underground subway, where he runs into a lone woman named Cynthia, who believes she's just dreaming. She entices Henry with a special favor if he would accompany her throughout the dreamscape.
It's just a dream, so I might as well have some fun.
It's not long after that Cynthia has to take a dream piss and scurries away to the restroom. Henry is left waiting until a couple of dogs with long protruding tongues smash their way out of the bathroom. These are sniffer dogs, and they feast off the blood of fallen enemies. They're not too dissimilar from the split heads of Silent Hill 3. The combat system here is the most half-baked in the Silent Hill series. It's totally unbalanced and not particularly challenging in any regard. While there are a couple of long-range weapons, the game is primarily melee combat focused. On the top left corner of the screen, they've put a bright blue health bar instead of a separate status menu to indicate health. However, if it's too distracting for you, you can turn it off. Just right of the bar, there's a new charge indicator represented by this circle. Depending on how full the circle is, will determine what kind of strike Henry is going to perform. Most of the time, it's either a quick forward strike or a wide sweeping strike fit for enemy mob encounters. Every input you make while in a combat stance adds to the circle, which may lead you to accidentally perform the wrong strike. It's a frequent annoyance that you'll notice early on. Mostly, you'll just stick to stunning an enemy and stomping on them to take them out of the equation. Some of the time, that is. Other enemies just can't be killed. Henry goes looking for Cynthia in the bathroom only to discover discovers she's gone, and instead, he finds another hole. Climbing in, it leads back to Henry's apartment, and introduces us to the gameplay loop. Room 302 acts as sort of a home base. When Henry is at home, his health will fully charge. You can also save your game, manage your inventory with the item chest, and partake in some harmless voyeurism. This time, Henry notices a side table is out of place. Upon moving it, he discovers a handgun, a note from the previous occupant, and a tiny peephole where he can observe his next door neighbor, Eileen Galvin, in her bedroom. Like the door peephole, Henry can observe various moments in Eileen's life as he makes return trips to 302. Henry's apartment provides a calm contrast to the horrific otherworlds you'll explore. This tone setting is meant to let your guard down and imbue a sense of security, albeit it's a temporary affair. Henry returns to the subway, only to be greeted by a strange, bloody mannequin with slit wrists, foreshadowing something that's going to happen at the end of the level, even though it doesn't go down that way. We're also introduced to the ghosts. Now, the ghosts you encounter are known as victims. Even though they're not formally introduced at the start, their backstories and larger purpose in the world will be gradually revealed to Henry as he uncovers the motive behind their murders. They're more of an annoyance than a threat in the game. They often clip in and out of the level just to slowly harm you via ghost radiation or some shit. I liken the victims to the Shibito from the Forbidden Siren series, which is also from Silent Hill creator Kiichiro Toyama. The ghosts cannot die per se, they can only be momentarily stunned before they spring right back up. It's often not even worth engaging with them unless they are impeding your pathway, which is a common occurrence considering all the narrow pathways throughout Silent Hill 4. However, the game does offer a few different strange methods to ghost bust. There are a handful of saint medallions you can pick up and equip on Henry. These will slow the ghost down, but they have a limited use before they break. Honestly, you're just better off saving these medallions in order to clear the hauntings that appear in 302 later on. In this day and age, it's quite refreshing to see a medallion that removes curses for a change. Oh no you don't. I came prepared. Be gone, Magi-chan. I shan't be your vessel. Whew. Had a feeling that was gonna happen. You can also pick up these holy candles, which are another finite resource in the game. If you're in a pinch, you can drop one down in front of a ghost, and it will lock them to the floor for the duration of the candle. Although, I wouldn't recommend it because holy candles are used as one of the primary exorcism tools in Henry's apartment. And if you care about getting the good ending, you're going to want to stock up as many of these candles as you can. Look, I gave him a little ghost ding-dong and put his soul to rest. You can also find a Sword of Obedience, which is used to stake a ghost to the floor and eliminate them from showing up in the rest of the game, so long as you don't pull the sword back out. There are only 5 of these swords in the game, so choose your target wisely. Finally, there are these extremely rare silver bullets, which will one-shot a ghost and stun them for a longer period of time. These are best used in conjunction with a Sword of Obedience to ensure you can stake a ghost before they rise again. So Henry and Cynthia link up, and the game gives you a sample of everyone's least favorite feature, the escort mission. Thankfully, Cynthia can't be killed. Well, at least not by the enemies. This is such a short and mostly pointless escort mission, because about 10 minutes after meeting up with Cynthia, she suddenly disappears and Henry is on his own again. Ah, finally, peace. Now I can take in all these beautiful umbilical cord vistas. Henry stumbles upon a 9-iron in one of the train cars, and I think this is as good of time as any to describe how weird the weapons are in the game. The room's weapon system is a precursor to the breakable inventory found in Silent Hill Origins and later Downpour. For example, you get a whole set of these golf clubs throughout the game. They're nothing special attack-wise and don't give you any unique advantage in combat. You stumble across these loose clubs, which can only survive a few whacks before they're bent out of shape and end up hogging a slot in your inventory. Even stranger is the fact that you also get an odd arsenal of unbreakable weapons too. The way the developers dish them out do not follow any particular rhyme or reason to the flow of the game. They give you a random assortment of weapons of varying power that are only useful in a very specific scenario. Like this can of pesticide that only comes in handy with the mosquitoes and nothing else. Considering that all the mosquitoes go down in one hit anyway, why would you ever waste an inventory slot on this? It's also a bit mean-spirited that the developers included a room containing replicas of all the various guns from past Silent Hill games. Like, hey, remember when we let you have options? That was fun. The weapons also bleed into the new inventory management. Henry has a limited amount of inventory slots on his person, so he'll have to frequently find a hole back to 302 to store all the junk he picks up in the game's sole item chest. The system is similar to the one found in Resident Evil. As Henry explores the worlds, you'll find that his inventory will get filled up quickly by loose ammo and health items, because they don't stack for whatever reason. Oddly enough, the ammo does stack in the chest at home, but not on Henry. I don't know why they did this. I guess this inventory management is just another excuse to get Henry to travel back to 302, which I'm not complaining about since it is the main enjoyment I derive from this madness. Anyway, Henry eventually gets to the end of the subway after embarrassingly getting smacked around by these wall demons on the escalator ride of shame, only to discover Cynthia has been attacked and the numbers 16 out of 21 have been carved into her chest. She passes away in his arms and Henry wakes back up in room 302 to notice an ambulance is carrying away a body near the entrance to the subway outside his apartment.
Hurry up and get that ambulance. Quit yapping and move her already. Damn, she's got numbers carved into her chest. I wonder if...
I believe this whole short tryst with Cynthia was only to establish the stakes within the game. And those simply are, if you die in the dream, you die for reals. Now if Henry looks out of the peephole, he'll notice a fresh bloody handprint added to the wall. I wonder what that could mean. When he goes back into the bathroom, the hole has now grown larger. With no other choice, he enters and is launched out into the forest world. This area is actually located in Silent Hill proper, and it's one of the better designed areas due to a good balance of shadows and lights. One of the major gripes I have with Silent Hill 4 is how well lit all the areas are. This is the first Silent Hill game that forgoes giving the protagonist a flashlight. By 2004 standards, the use of ambient, volumetric, and point lighting were impressive features to see on that hardware. In the context of a survival horror game, most of the levels are flatly lit and everything is visible, which runs counter to the whole premise of horror. The removal of the flashlight also rooted out the stealth option, as players can no longer sneak by enemies in the darkness, and now they always know where your position is. The forest world provides the annoying flying mosquito enemies that don't really do a whole lot of damage. They just run into your pathway and slow you down. There's also this really weird booby trap in the middle of the woods. It only activates once throughout the entire game, and I've tried to trap these dogs under it to see if I could just smash them, but they just never walk under it. Henry also can't get under this booby trap because it activates before he gets there, so I'm just baffled by its inclusion. It's not scary. It serves no functional purpose. It's just kinda there. Fans of Silent Hill 2 might also appreciate the beautiful view of Toluca Lake. Here the story finally begins to pick up. You meet a religious fanatic, Jasper Geen, who gives you some insight into Silent Hill's cult known as the Order.
They used to collect orphans and did things to them.
In the center of the forest lies the orphanage known as Wish House. which was run by the Cult of the Order for the purposes of indoctrinating young children to join the fold. Now, the Wish House was briefly mentioned in an article in Silent Hill 3 penned by investigative journalist Joseph Schreiber. Silent Hill 3's antagonist, Claudia Wolf, was taught the religious practices of the cult at the Wish House, as well as a certain someone else that we're just about to meet. Henry discovers a young boy running around, but before they can talk, Jasper scares him away with his religious babble.
Something big is gonna happen. Finally, it's gonna happen!
Back at the entrance of the Wish House, the most important scene in the game is about to take place. Jasper is dying of thirst, and the only thing that can quench it is a bottle of Henry's expired chocolate milk. You hand it over, and Jasper just chugs that thing down.
Oh man, that was awesome.
In return, Jasper gives Henry a shovel, which is used to dig up a cursed key, leading to the game's only clever puzzle. The cursed key cannot be carried, otherwise it will throw you through an endless loop in the forest. So you then have to find a hole to 302, dump the cursed key off in the chest, go back to the forest, walk over to the Wish House, jump into that hole, grab the key, and then come back to the Wish House to unlock it. What an ordeal. Upon entering the Wish House, Jasper wanders off, and Henry walks in on our psychotic friend in the throes of immolation. Jasper grabs a candelabra and carves some mysterious numbers into his chest, 17 out of 21.
I finally met him! The one the nosy guy talked about! The devil!
Henry suddenly wakes up in 302 again, and the game begins its descent into the weirdest universe building territory I've ever seen. For one, the superintendent of Henry's apartment tries to open the door to 302 from the outside. By the way, this guy is named Frank Sunderland, who coincidentally is the father of Silent Hill 2's protagonist, James Sunderland. It's such an odd and mostly underdeveloped connection, but one that makes the universe of Silent Hill feel more interesting than it really is. Frank's a little bit of a weirdo once you get to know him. He has a strange fixation on keeping an umbilical cord he found in the apartment, and this ends up being the linchpin to the antagonist's operations, so I guess he's not entirely useless to the plot here.
The umbilical cord I keep in a box in my room. Lately it's started to smell terrible.
Huh? Umbilical cord?
Well, forget I said anything.
Anyway, the hole in Henry's bathroom grows larger still, and he slides on in it. This time, he wakes up on the dripping wet floors of the water prison world. A man by the name of Andrew DeSalvo is locked in one of the cells.
He's gonna kill me! Walter's gonna kill me!
From here, it's a dank and musty journey through 3 copy-paste floors of the prison. Notable moments, you can encounter the game's creepiest enemy, the twin victim. This thing used to terrify me, but playing it now, they pose almost no threat. They just kind of run up on you, strike, and then run away. There are also a handful of slimy slugs, and you can paint the surfaces with their guts. Why do I find this so enjoyable? The only interesting bit of atmosphere to the water prison is that occasionally a shadow of a warden can be seen walking across the ceiling of the cells. Special note, there's a stun gun weapon you can find, but it'll add another 15 minutes of backtracking if you want to get it. It's extremely slow and almost impractical in every situation, so don't bother. The puzzle in here is just lining up a few different cells with a crank and then jumping through some holes. Deja vu, Henry discovers Andrew DeSalvo's corpse with spooky numbers carved into it and wakes up again in 302. And once again, it's back to the bathroom and into the big hole we go. Henry wakes up in the alleyway of Building World. This has one of the better introductions to a world, as Henry can observe these packs of monkeys just jumping from rooftop to rooftop. It's really creepy in an ambient sort of way. Building World starts on the rooftop of the Hotel South Ashfield, which is across the road from Henry's apartment. This is where the funniest character introduction takes place. Richard Braintree drops down from 2 stories, lands on his arm, and then just completely walks it off.
Hey, you're the guy that lives across from me.
Richard starts to catch on that there's something wrong with the apartment building, and he wonders if the same sort of thing happened to the previous tenant in room 302, an investigative journalist who disappeared suddenly one day.
A journalist. He disappeared one day. He got pretty crazy towards the end. Shut himself up in his room and wouldn't come out?
Not a whole lot goes down here. Henry attends the saddest birthday party of all time. He smashes a bunch of gooey slugs and then wanders into Richard's apartment as he's being fried alive in an electric chair. This is the most brutal and unsettling kill the game provides. 19 out of 21. Back at room 302, the bathroom hole reaches its apex, and Henry could probably just walk his way to the next world. This time he wakes up in apartment world.
What the hell is this?
There he sees Walter Sullivan knocking on his next door neighbor Eileen Galvin's door this time. Now, out of all the worlds, I feel the apartment world is the most fleshed out in both senses of the word. That's right, he's now on the outside of room 302 in the South Ashfield Heights apartment. Henry can go into other apartment rooms and learn about the tenants and all the little drama that's going on within the apartment. For example, there's a guy named Mike stalking a nurse named Rachel, who just so happens to be the very same nurse that took care of Mary Sunderland from Silent Hill 2.
Wanna read it? But don't tell Rachel, okay?
Who's Rachel?
She was our nurse. I took it from her locker.
It's just like one of those weird references once again. A neat feature about Apartment World is that Henry can uncover these red letters. He can't read them inside Apartment World, but he can slip them under the doorway to 302, and when he pops back over to 302, he can then retrieve them and read more about the Walter Sullivan killings. A letter from Joseph Schreiber is slipped under Henry's door, which describes a series of mass murders that took place many years ago, where the murderer tore out the hearts of 10 victims, carved strange numbers into their bodies, and wrote his own name on the bodies. And his name was Walter Sullivan. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because Walter Sullivan was an off-screen character mentioned in an article found in a dumpster in Silent Hill 2. In the article, it described how Walter Sullivan killed a couple of kids at the orders of the Red Devil, and eventually himself with a spoon to the jugular. Walter's gravestone can also be found at the Toluca prison.
Silent Hill witnessed a gruesome murder a few years back. A brother and sister were playing in the road when they were attacked and chopped into pieces with an axe. What was the name of the murderer who committed this vile act? 1. Walter Sullivan. 2. Scott Fairbanks. 3. Eric Day.
The fact that this somewhat insignificant off-screen character in Silent Hill 2 later became the main antagonist in Silent Hill 4 was such a nice and unexpected surprise. We actually get to meet with Walter Sullivan as he's sitting on the staircase reminiscing about his younger days when he met Eileen Galvin, and out of the kindness of her heart she gifted Walter a doll, and he wants to pay it forward by giving the doll to Henry. But take it from Hikiko, don't pick up that doll. The victim this time around is Eileen Galvin, but unlike the other victims, she actually survives her attack. And back at 302, Henry can witness her being shuttled away to the hospital.
So they took the victim to St. Jerome's, huh?
Yeah, she's not gonna make it. She had numbers in her back, too. Walter Sullivan copycat. Round 3, huh?
Back at the bathroom and, I'm seeing another connection here. Henry is now without a hole, and that's a problem. People need holes, don't you know? Well, thankfully, he's collected all these plates, which he can use to plug into his laundry room's wall and create a new hole. Simple as. Henry travels through his new hole and ends up in the hospital world. It starts off with this really creepy autopsy that Walter's doing on some unknown woman. He doesn't say a single thing, he just creepily lurches over at Henry. It's one of my favorite Walter moments for sure. This officially marks the halfway point in the game, which unfortunately takes a huge cliff dive in terms of quality and fun. The overall vibe to the hospital world can best be described as a haunted house attraction at a Midwestern carnival. There's a lot of spectacle and entertainment value, but not much in the way of substance or lingering dread to the scares. It's amusing to the same degree as the Borley Haunted Mansion section of Silent Hill 3. It downright copies one of the jump scares in one instance.
This mansion is quite old, so please watch your step. I'm so sorry. This place is just falling apart.
Henry and a badly injured Eileen link up, and from this point forward, the game commits to two of the most annoying tropes in tandem: the escort mission and unnecessary backtracking to pad out the game. Both of these things aren't as bad as they've been made out to be over the years. For one, most Silent Hill games have backtracking in them via the Otherworld segments. Essentially, you go through a section in the fog world, as it were, and then shortly after you'd go through the Otherworld variant of it. But in Silent Hill 4, they decided to just put all the Otherworld segments back to back to back to back to back. It's not great, it's not fun, but it's not untypical for a Silent Hill game. Secondly, the escort bit with Eileen is a little bit overblown. For one, she can't die, but her well-being does determine what kind of ending you're gonna get in the end. So if you don't care about getting the best possible ending, then you really don't have a whole lot to worry about. Also, for being a one-armed cripple suffering from weeping lacerations, it doesn't seem to slow Eileen down one bit. She kicks all kinds of ass if you let her loose with one of her arsenal of Nightwalker weaponry. Get him, Eileen! Whoa, that's what's up. The problem arises when Eileen gets distracted by her bloodlust and won't stop attacking these ghosts as you're running for the exit. She will get stuck on trying to take out one of these ghosts and will continually attack them as they attempt to rise again. The only way to get her to stop is by disarming her completely. If you're trying to get through this game, I would recommend not equipping Eileen with anything. Also, Eileen needs to be within viewing proximity of Henry and the door in order to proceed to the next area without leaving her behind. If you leave her behind and she gets injured, that's when she gets cursed, which then determines what kind of ending you're gonna get. I found the best way to get Eileen to stick to Henry is by consistently tapping the run button. Tapping the run button keeps Henry in his walking animation, but Eileen will read the input of the run button and will begin to run to Henry's position. I also tend to run Henry up against a doorway until Eileen enters the frame before I enter. For the most part, many of the enemies in the game seem to be indifferent to her presence. I mean, look at that guy. He just didn't give a shit. When Henry and Eileen leave the hospital, this also marks when Henry's apartment starts to become haunted. No longer will room 302 recover your health. Instead, you'll occasionally find some health-draining hauntings, which you'll have to exercise with the aforementioned methods I showed off before. You want to hear some bullshit though? There are only 14 hauntings that you can uncover in room 302, but half of those hauntings do not appear on the PC version, which is what I'm playing right now for this capture. So if you play the PC version, you are getting 50% less fun in this department. I am incredibly disappointed. The hauntings are by far my favorite part about the room, but I wish they were a more consistent element all throughout the game, rather than just being flipped on halfway through. However, there are some subtle hauntings that do take place in the first half of the game. For example, they did try to put a random face in the wall over here. It doesn't cause any damage or do anything in particular. It's just out of place enough to be unsettling. Regardless of the lackluster execution of the hauntings, there was still some value in this concept. So much so that 10 years after the room released, Hideo Kojima's team built upon the room's framework with PT, which in itself was a secret Silent Hill project. There's a lot of residual Silent Hill 4 ectoplasm left over in PT's design. The game is played entirely from the first-person perspective, where you're trapped inside a home. As you press forward, you encounter randomized hauntings and subtle changes to the environment with every loop through the spooky hallway. Bits of the story are also told to you through radio broadcasts. There's the baby/birth themes at play, not to mention a hole in the bathroom wall. In my opinion, PT was just the room distilled into its greatest parts. I suppose it's also worth mentioning that 2011's Silent Hill Downpour also included Room 302 as an Easter egg of sorts that Murphy can discover. Geographically speaking, it doesn't make any sense because 302 is supposed to reside in Ashfield, which according to Downpour is over 168 miles away from Silent Hill. The first stop in the backtracking is the return to the subway world. The only major difference here is the addition of a new victim, our old pal Cynthia. She's by far one of the most frustrating victims to deal with, as she will slither across the ground and she's nearly impossible to stake. I found it was best to corner her whilst wearing a Saints medallion and then just wailing on her with Henry and Eileen until she drops. Then you have a split-second frame to stake her. So make sure you have the Sword of Obedience highlighted before you do this. You gotta stake her, otherwise you've gotta deal with her for the rest of the game. Now, this whole backtracking affair revolves around descending deeper into Walter's subconscious dreamscape, and all of these areas you visited held some sort of significance to Walter's life. For instance, at one point he was homeless, and he was a panhandler in the subways of Ashfield. You know, symbolism and metaphor are quite prevalent in the Silent Hill series, but outside of the enormous umbilical cords protruding through some of the environments, I feel the majority of the symbolism on display was lost on me. Like, what does this sheep represent here? My media literacy degree is failing me on this dancing baby. Walter's subconscious is more like a debug room with random unused assets strewn about haphazardly. It's very deep and symbolic, I'm sure. Walter Sullivan is perhaps the biggest failure in execution here, and I'm not just talking about the state and their failure to execute him. The idea of having Walter as a universe-uniting thread that incorporated the lore of all 4 mainline Silent Hill games was ripe with potential. However, I can pinpoint the exact moment when Walter becomes less interesting. This cutscene right here. From this point forward, Walter is now thrown into the mix as an immortal stalker enemy that will pursue you across maps. He's so ridiculously OP. I mean, look at this. I enter the area and Walter is unloading dual pistols into Henry's face. Sometimes he just randomly appears when you're just trying to take in the lore. This dude really hates dogs. Unlike the ghosts, there's no way to stop Walter from rising again. You can stun him, but then he just comes right back with full health and sometimes a chainsaw. I feel Walter would have been a more terrifying antagonist if he was used more sparingly. On paper, he sounds kinda cool. He's a guy that harnesses the teachings of the Order to construct his own nightmarish otherworlds. Walter is a ghost hell-bent on revenge. And he's essentially just Freddy Krueger if you think about it. In a sense, it's Henry versus an architect of nightmares. Now, in the first half of Silent Hill 4, that's exactly how Walter is presented. He's a mysterious figure with unknown motivations that Henry is always just one step behind. Henry makes his return to the forest world with Eileen in tow. A crispier Jasper is there to greet us. I don't have any more chocolate milk to extinguish the flames of his agony, so I guess this sword will just have to do. What's cool is that Eileen can now translate all the previously undecipherable writing strewn about the forest, which will inform you about Walter's upbringing at the Wish House and his true motivations behind the mass killings.
October 16th. Some important people came today. One of them, it's cut off. I can't read anymore.
I'm going to be as brief as possible here. Essentially, Walter was abandoned in room 302 by his parents when he was a baby. He was then adopted and raised by the cult of the Order. In their teachings, they spoke of a ritual known as the Descent of the Holy Mother, the 21 Sacraments. This ritual requires the sacrifice of 21 victims in order to bring forth paradise. One of the leaders in the cult, Dahlia Gillespie, who you might remember from the original Silent Hill, convinced a young Walter that carrying out the 21 sacraments would reunite him with his mother in paradise.
But soon I'll get to see my mom.
Do you know where she is now?
Yeah, of course. Right where I was born. Lots of people tried to stop me, but it's fine now. It says in the scriptures that I'll be with her.
All those ghostly victims from before, with the strange numbers carved into them, those were the victims of Walter carrying out the rites of the 21 Sacraments. Walter himself was also counted among the victims, but it's really unclear in Silent Hill lore if he really died in the prison or not. Canonically, he was buried at Toluca Prison in Silent Hill 2, but in 4, they took his body and placed it in an unmarked grave in the forest near the Wish House, where later on it's inexplicably exhumed. He also is manifested as this little child that's running around throughout the game. I guess it's best not to dwell on it because it only gets weirder from here. Walking deeper into Walter's subconscious, Henry makes his return to the water prison. Right off the bat, Walter will pursue Henry and Eileen with dual pistols. It's best to try and run from them, but swarms of mosquitoes will slow you down. Just make sure Eileen doesn't have any weapons equipped, otherwise you're in for a bad time. We learned the water prison was where the Order sent misbehaving children as a punishment, and it was a place where Walter spent a lot of his childhood at. He had a friend there named Bob that was abused by one of the workers, who turns out to be Andrew DeSalvo. One day, Bob disappeared, and Walter believed Andrew was responsible. Speaking of, Andrew DeSalvo is now a new victim, and it's actually required this time around to knock him out in order to get the key to the exit. A silver bullet and a sword of obedience should do the trick. By the way, the developers put up a nasty blockade of twin victims near the escape route. If you're going for the good ending, you may want to leave Eileen behind and clear out the room with Henry first. There's just no chance to avoid getting hit here. Henry and Eileen arrive at Building World, where they're greeted by the ghost of Richard Braintree. Out of all the victims, I think Richard's concept is the coolest. He glitches out and his animations will reverse sometimes. I ran out of swords at this point in the game, so he pursued me throughout the level. The goal here is to find objects of significance to the victims in the level and return them to their rightful places to then put their souls to rest. One fact we learn about Walter is that one day he went on a rampage at this pet shop and killed the owner and all the animals in the store with a hail of bullets. Now the human murder I could forgive, but I'll never forgive a dog killer. We witness Walter kidnap himself, and then he escapes into the deepest part of himself, with himself. On the way out of the level, he'll be forced into one of the game's 2 total boss fights. Well, 3 if you count DeSalvo. This is the One Truth, and it's the laziest, most uninspired boss fight in all of the Silent Hill series. It's straight up just a reskinned wall demon, copy and pasted across a square arena. This fight boils down to finding the one true One Truth out of a lineup of imposters, and then attacking the real one to damage the clones. Don't even bother trying to use a gun here, because Henry will get confused and locking onto your desired target is impossible. At this stage in the game, you can start to feel the budget run out. The game begins to wind down as Henry and Eileen traverse down the winding staircase to the deepest part of Walter, which just so happens to be room 302. They enter a past version of the room littered with holy candles. There, they come face to face with the elusive Joseph Schreiber. Sort of. Throughout the story, Henry has been guided by Joseph as an omnipresent guardian angel. Henry himself isn't much of a character to speak of, and for the most part, he was just retracing Joseph's steps, who honestly did all the real groundwork in cracking the Walter Sullivan murder spree. The entire game seemed to be building up to this moment, the grand reveal of Joseph Schreiber, and, well, he's presented as a half-rendered textureless 3D model that they just glued to the ceiling upside down. I guess they hand-wave this lack of effort by suggesting Joseph encased himself in candle wax and stuck himself to the ceiling, I guess to protect his soul from Walter's evil or some shit? Sure, that's one way to go about it. Joseph's lone cutscene is both the most half-assed affair, but also Kino in equal measure in its attempt to play the whole thing off straight.
You must kill him. You must must kill him. Kill. Kill. Kill.
Okay, so Joseph lets Henry and Eileen know that in order to kill Walter, they need to find the real Walter. And these two ain't him. He also left a detailed instruction manual on how to kill the final boss on the coffee table. Once again proving Joseph Schreiber is the real MVP. Henry finds the pickaxe of hope stabbed into the back wall. He then climbs into a hole back into 302 of the present. He takes the pickaxe and tears open a hole, which shockingly reveals the corpse of the really real Walter Sullivan. This absolutely blew my mind the first time I saw this. And years later, I'm still confused. Everyone else out there in the Silent Hill community is all caught up wondering how Eddie got the pizza.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
Yet I'm sitting here wondering why Henry didn't smell a dead body behind his wall for over 2 years. At some point, Walter escaped from prison or was never captured in the first place, snuck his way into room 302 whilst Joseph Schreiber was still living there, crucified himself to this post, and performed a ritual known as the Holy Assumption, which allowed him to split his soul into a 30-year-old man and a young boy, which is honestly not that strange in Silent Hill. It's not the first time someone split their soul. But then somebody walled him in there, and Frank Sunderland somehow didn't notice the storage space was blocked off when he was showing Henry Townsend the new apartment he was gonna move into. You'd think that kind of shit would have been mentioned in the rental agreement. I think this ritual is a callback to Silent Hill 2's Rebirth ending, which required James to find all of these items related to the ritual of rebirth, such as the White Chrism and the Obsidian Goblet, to bring back his dead wife. I also think this is some bizarre reference to the Holy Trinity. You have Corpse Walter as the father, you have Kid Walter as the son, and then you have Holy Ghost Walter. So Henry reaches into the pockets of Corpse Walter and pulls out the keys to the locks on 302. I don't even know how this dead guy locked him in there in the first place, and I don't care. Henry unlocks the door and he stumbles out into the apartment world once again. It's a bit of a letdown that they couldn't think of anything more clever than, let's just run through apartment world again, why not? The goal here is for Henry and Eileen to find keys to unlock the superintendent's door this time, and they do so by encountering Walter's past.
Hurry up. Get back.
Walter was abandoned in room 302 by his parents, where he was discovered by Frank Sunderland, who sent him to St. Jerome's Hospital. For some reason, Frank held on to Walter's umbilical cord, but it's a good thing he did. I thought the PC version was glitching out when Eileen was in the lobby of the apartment. She just stopped following Henry around, so I kept pushing her character model whilst equipping and unequipping her weapons so I could stall her model and push her towards these double doors so she would continue on with me. Turns out she's supposed to stop there in the lobby, and I was the one who was glitching the game. Whoops. The return to the apartment world teeters on the brink of emotionally touching and annoying, with the disembodied voice of baby Walter saying, and it almost makes me feel sorry for Walter if it wasn't for that whole murdering a bunch of animals thing. Henry and Eileen eventually unlock Frank Sunderland's apartment, and in it, they find a box containing Walter's foreskin. I mean, umbilical cord. This scene will play out a little differently depending on if Eileen is cursed or not.
I'll wake you up. We're the only ones. The only ones who can stop him. We're the only ones. The only ones that can stop him.
After this cutscene, the escort mission is officially over, and Henry's headed for a showdown with Walter. Walter's corpse has now slid into this mysterious hole in the ground, which acts as a portal to the final boss room. Let me explain what's going on here. Walter's ghost and the corpse of Walter are trying to conjure paradise by completing the 21 Sacraments ritual. Problem is, they only have 19 victims so far, so Walter has to kill both Eileen and Henry to complete the ritual.
Henry, you're it. The last of the 21 Sacraments.
The last last boss fight is somewhat of a puzzle and somewhat of a fight. Eileen is on a walkway headed towards a spinning ball, which I'm just gonna call the bathysphere. If she's cursed, she's gonna make a mad dash towards the grinder and die, leading to one of the game's bad endings. However, if you've managed to keep her free from possession, she'll take about 3 to 4 minutes to get there. During this time, Henry has to return the umbilical cord to Walter's flesh demon form and then jab it with 8 spears that he can pull out of these corpses in the arena, which makes Ghost Walter vulnerable. If you're playing on hard mode, this can be quite a challenging fight, as Ghost Walter takes over 50 bullets and a whole bunch of whacks with the axe before he'll go down. You'll actually have to employ the little-known dodge mechanic to avoid his bullets and his spin attacks. You can still qualify for one of 2 endings per playthrough. The other determining factor for the ending is whether or not Henry's apartment is possessed near the end of the game. If you let all the ghosts in, that qualifies you for one of the bad endings. So, the best possible ending: you let Eileen live, and you exorcise all the ghosts out of your apartment, and it goes with the typical happy ending. They both escape, Henry visits Eileen in the hospital and brings her flowers, and they hook up. Boring. My personal favorite ending is the 21 Sacraments, which is one of the easier endings to get. All you gotta do is infest your apartment with ghosts, let Eileen get possessed, and turn into the red goo. Both Walters can finally call 302 their mom home, and Walter murders a bunch of cops and anyone else who dares disturb room 302. I kind of look at this as the canon ending, due to how the Silent Hill series just kind of ended with 4. Evil is won, Walter's other world is taken over, no more good Silent Hill games can ever be made again. I hate to break it to you, but this is canon.
Mom, I'm home. I won't let anyone get in my way. Gonna stay with you forever.
20 years later, in Silent Hill 4, The Room remains the most middle-of-the-road game in the mainline series. It's not horrible, it's not great, it's somewhere in the middle. There's an outline of a much better game there, but I don't hate it. I just don't think it deserves a lot of the credit that some people on YouTube say. Like, this is the scariest entry, the most disturbing entry in all of Silent Hill, and they just overblow it. It's really not scary at all. Everything is brightly lit. I can see all the enemies, they can see me. The entire pathway before you is clear. Zero tension throughout this. Like, if you didn't play the other Silent Hill games, you'd be missing a lot of important context too. It's not one you can just go in independently, okay? You gotta really be a fan of Silent Hill. This is for the OG Silent Hill fans. Okay, I don't know if a lot of modern gamers, like people that enjoyed PT or some of the Western entries or the upcoming remake, I don't know that they could go back and play this. So if you are gonna go into the original Silent Hill series, okay, my recommendation, play them in release order, okay? Don't start with the remake because it may be a little too polished compared to this. Anyways, I just heard a knock on my door. I gotta get that.